Greetings, friends. I had to wait today to come on here because I have things to do. I'm baking whole wheat bread and doing a number of other things right now. And it's been kind of hard because I've been wanting to come on, but there's so much going on right now. I'm that other creator. I have to talk a little bit about that. But after that, I want to talk about a case that came into the media that I'm looking at that is just it's Quiverfull writ large, but the people who are writing news articles about this couple are missing that. They're missing some big things, so I want to go over that. If you know who I am, I'm Suzanne Tidkemeier. I used to write a column called No Longer Quivering about the evangelical Quiverfull movement, which I'm going to cover a little bit about today. But I covered evangelicals all across the boards from from across the board. The non-denominational, hardcore, quiverful, not just quiverful, but just evangelicalism in general, that was non-denominational. Anything with a high demand religious organization slant, I covered. And part of that was looking at and breaking down some of these things from my channel, my Pathos thing. Yeah, my brain is gone. It's bread bacon day. So I used to do that. I have a pretty good handle on that world. So this is Taco Tuesday, totalitarian authoritative church organizations. So I do this every Tuesday. I take some kind of thing with Quiverful or evangelical and I'll explain it and talk about it in detail. That's what I'm planning on doing today. Hey, so first I wanted to talk about the insanity going on, just a hair in the world of, and I don't, my Kleenex box is not near. Without a box of Kleenex, Katie Joy. Something has gone down in her world, and she is covering now frantically. So she's decided to accuse Mistie Mo and Nikki, darling Nikki, who I am connected to here, of being the ones doing the whole threatening emails and the whole I got swatted this weekend thing. And she's trying to link all of us to Robert Shin and say that Robert Shin, sorry, KJ supporters that scream at me every time I touch my hair. I touch my hair. So she's trying to link us all to Robert, and that's not true. We're not all Roberts. We're not in Robert's pocket. Most of the creators I know think Robert is as problematic as I think Robert is. And I explained how I think he's a member, he runs a taco type church. So she's been claiming to be swatted and that people are pretending to be her and her neighbors. They're calling the FBI, they're calling the local sheriff's department. Here's the thing, I don't think that's entirely true. During Tati Westbrook thing, somehow Natalie came in, and I'm not going to say Natalie's name because I don't want her appearing here. She was the one supposedly sending all these emails and stuff and doing all this stuff and supposedly confessed to it. She did tell me a few things about it when I talked to her because I used to talk to her every now and then on Twitter because I felt kind of sorry for the poor girl. So I don't know what the truth is about Natalie, but here's the truth I do know. Every time there's a lawsuit or troubles, our dear Catherine trots out somebody in the troll group that she claims that Reddit without a crystal ball is, which I've never seen anything remotely like what she's saying going on Reddit. I suspect has never happened on Reddit, but to hear her say we're all fomenting rebellion there and Robert is paying us all. No such thing. I wish Robert was paying me. Even though I wouldn't take his money because I don't deal with people like that. When I think somebody is a crap person, that's it for me. So before I go on with this, I need to say don't harass or go real life with anybody that I'm talking about here. Catherine is making all these wild claims. I don't see it. I've never seen any evidence that Misty Moo is any kind of person calling the police, nor Nikki. I know Nikki well enough to know this is very unlikely, very unlikely. So I just want to say this is all pure Catherine. Catherine's in trouble in some way, shape, or form that we don't know about. And this is how she's dealing with it by making up false allegations. You know, she didn't claim to be threatened until Miranda said she'd been threatened. And I believe Miranda because there are a lot of crazy people in Katie Joy's fan base that would absolutely do something like that. So I want to go over just a second, just a little second, the some allegations that I read you guys about the whole crazy thing back when she was talking about Creepshow art right after she settled with Tati Westbrook. So during the Tati case, Natalie got pulled out as a convenient excuse as the one doing all the horrible threats and things, the threats to unalive Catherine and her son. Okay, so I am looking right now at a claim made in June 15th, almost the 2021, almost more than 3 years ago. I keep forgetting June's half done. It says, now Catherine claims that Shannon of Creepshow Art is responsible for all the death threats she claims that she's been receiving, all the emails and hack attempts. These are the same attempts that ended during the settlement with the Westbrooks from supposedly Natalie and her friends. And today, the 15th, she received nasty emails purportedly to be from Shannon. Natalie is also claiming to receive an assortment of harassing emails today from Shannon. What no one is saying is these emails could have come from a hack shop on the dark web at the hire and behest of Clark Swanson or anybody else. The same Clark Swanson suing Halo Beauty and Tati Westbrook for millions of dollars, the same Clark Swanson that Catherine had to give up as her confidential source, feeding her information about the Westbrooks. So, why am I telling you this? Why am I reading this to you? Because I'm trying to prove a point here. My point being that this is a standard pattern of behavior. So don't freak out. It's just what this woman does. So we don't pay much attention to it. Breathe in, breathe out, move on. It's not Misty Mo. It's not Nikki. I don't even know if it's Robert Shin. I don't know. It could be anybody, nobody. But looking at the pattern of Catherine's behavior every time she gets into trouble, I would say it's very unlikely. It's very unlikely. Maybe the calls are coming from inside the house, Catherine. Think about that one for a minute. All of you guys. I wouldn't doubt that somehow this is around her. Okay, so I'm done with that trash bag and I don't want to talk about her anymore. It's like gross. The thing I want to talk about today is a case involving a Quiverfull family by the name of Pence. And I don't mean Mike Pence, even though Mike does go to a church that I've been to in Northern Virginia. That is a Quiverfull church. I mean, I've been there. I know what they preach. So our ex vice president is definitely involved in one of those type churches. No, this is a couple. Let me pull it up and see if Christopher Pence is the husband. And in a lot of ways, they are the world's most typical Quiverfull couple. They became Christians after they got married. The wife had 5 children. He turned around and had a vasectomy, or was it four? 4 or 5 children. He had a vasectomy because he decided he didn't want any more. And while he was a Christian, he didn't think that was the thing. So in the meantime, both him and his wife felt convicted, that word that Quiverfull loves to use, an evangelical town, to have more children. So they did. He got his vasectomy reversed a year later. Okay. And they went on to have 6 more children. They ended up having a total of 11. And that's where it should have ended, okay? Because quiverful families, if that is your choice to do that and you're not harming anyone, that's one thing. They were all in doing the whole homeschooling thing. He worked for Microsoft and a bunch of other places doing computers. He worked from home. So there was this infrastructure in place for all of that. His wife homeschooled and baked and raised gardens and the whole 9 yards that is pushed as the proper quiverful motherhood thing. And just one second. I have got to. Okay, come on. I'm trying to do so I can toggle this crap. Okay, toggle. And we're still rolling. Because when I start doing filming sometimes, and I go to another screen, it just goes haywire. But that is more about my computer than anything else. And there was a big article about this couple. It just recently came out. It's an in-depth thing that I'm getting ready to read you highlights, quotes from this couple. Why? Well, basically, their little quiverful thing went haywire. Their quiver broke, and they decided to do the most quiverful thing also, which is adopt. They decided they would adopt children, a large family group. Christopher Pence and his wife adopted 5 children from another family, bringing their family size to a grand total of 16 children or 15 living. So Christopher did the Josh Duggar thing. He put a browser on his computer. He put Tails, an operating system, so that he could have privacy, and he used it to access the dark web. He was looking for Hitman, because even though his wife and him had adopted these 5 children, the children's family still wanted the children wanted to stay in contact. And we don't know what the precipitating event was. But this good, quiverful, good self-righteous, self-described Christian patriarch, paterfamilias, tried to hire a hitman online in the dumbest way possible. They moved all over the United States several times. That's very typical for quiverful families because once CPS starts nosing around, they start moving. They've changed states, and that's a sad thing. CPS records do not transfer. They should transfer. There should be some kind of national database for this. This would end a lot of this crap. And quiverful families love to adopt so that they can enlarge in their families. And it's very common, very common. It's kind of sad that they go about it that way. Sometimes it takes tragic turns when mothers are stretched too thin, like with the Tommy Musser case with Susanna Musser, exhausted, stepped away for half a second, and Tommy drowned in the bathtub. Those things happen when you have a higher mother to child ratio that violates any kind of daycare requirement, even as far as the number of children to caregiver. So at their last move, they moved to Utah. Okay, they moved to a beautiful home on the northern edge of the Mojave Desert, surrounded by mountains in every way. So they had their 11 biological and 5 adopted children. They ended up having to get larger and larger homes. And their house in the Mojave Desert was a 5,800 square feet home on the northernmost edge. I'm sitting here thinking about that. That's about double the size of my house. And I can't imagine having that many people in it. It would just be way too crowded. It would be crazy. So there's that. So they had a 15 passenger Ford Transit van and would go to the church there in Utah. They were not Mormon. They would go to Valley Bible Church, talk to the pastor, put him in touch with a lawyer to deal with all this crap because they kept saying they were having problems with the biological family of the children. They had adopted from a couple named Christina and Francisco Cordero. And the problem was the Corderos wanted to keep remaining in contact with their children. And Christopher had recently cut that off and thought that the Corderos were pushing it too much. They even moved across the country to live close to the children when they lived in Texas, when the family was living there. And we're after him to let them park their RV on there. So there's some tension, obviously. So when you have people that think that their word is a law, that believe that they're not accountable to anybody but God, they sometimes go to some weird places. So Christopher ended up in the most suspicious looking website I've ever seen. There's a picture of the website on the article. The article is up right now at one of the New York Times websites. I'm going to put a link to the article in my description so it goes around the paywall. I've got a paywall free one because if you don't, you're going to run across the New York Times paywall if you don't go in that way. So, this website that he tried to connect with to have the children's biological family murdered was called the Sinaloa Cartel Marketplace. And if you're living under a rock, you don't know who the Sinaloa Cartel is. They're one of the cartels in Central and South America. I'm not sure if they're in South America, but they're definitely in Mexico and Guatemala and all kinds of other places, is my understanding. So this big dodo transferred $1,600 worth of Bitcoin and submitted orders to kill the Corderos. His wife's name was Michelle. And they just ended up going more and more non-denominational, high demand religious organization as you could get. They kept going to more and more radical churches. His wife claims that and she had a blog for a long time, but I can't seem to find it online now. She claims that she read Debbie Pearl's Created to Be His Helpmeet and another book by the name of The Power of Motherhood and became radicalized with Quiverfull. Many women, that is their route in, and they try to change their husbands by turning the whole damn thing over to God. And when that happens, sometimes it goes crazy and it doesn't work out the way they said because and then their religion will get blamed for that because they weren't submitting in the right way. Here's a quote from his wife's blog. I entered into marriage thinking of it as an equal partnership, knowing but not understanding what it meant that my husband is my head. I had no idea the importance of my role as a mother and the significance God placed on motherhood. I had no idea that God called barrenness a curse and that children are the greatest blessing he can bestow. I had no idea that God said so much about children in the Bible. They are a heritage, a reward, a blessing, precious little lambs, arrows in the hands of a mighty warrior, and so much more. Well, that's exactly this kind of language that gets used so much in Quiverfull. and in high demand non denominational churches like I'm talking about today. That's exactly what they say. You hear my voice going out? My occupational therapist wants me to talk in a higher, lighter tone, which would be awesome if I could get myself to do it. But I can't. You've got the old witch here. Okay. So the princes came to quote, trust God to open and close the womb as he sees fit. That is Quiverfull in a nutshell. And at the time, they were living northeast of Seattle. They were not moving all over the place to avoid CPS like they're doing now. They basically found, and they applied to adopt all these children. They went through all the home studies, all of that. And they kept saying that because they were sinners and not worthy of being called righteous or anything else, are not worthy of being loved by God until they come to a saving knowledge of Christ, they say they want to be that in the life of a child. So they want to take God's place in the life of a child. Quote, making the same commitment to a child or children that God made to us to take us in our filth, our sin, our depravity, and bring us to a place of being a beloved child. Hey, that is typical Quiverful speak as well. So they went through all of this to get a young sibling group is what they wanted. And they worked with traditional agencies, went through home studies, training, all sorts of different things, psychological reviews. And they had a couple opportunities that didn't work and it didn't work out. Something happened. And one of the organizations they tried to go through blocked them entirely from adopting because they doubted the Pences already. They doubted that that was an optimal situation because they had so many children in that same age group. And it was only after the Pences gave birth to their last child that they started doing the thing that a lot of fundamentalists do, and a lot of evangelicals, I should say, not so much fundamentalists. They started searching for either a disrupted adoption or for a family desperate to keep their kids out of foster care. And that's where they landed, was an unregulated foster care experience. Where am I? They found Christina Cordero and Francisco through Facebook, where a lot of these adoptions that are private, that are these disrupted adoptions, they seem to go through all these Facebook groups. And for a while, Facebook was good about allowing people to do this. But this has crept back in post uh, COVID. So that's how they found the Corderos was through Facebook, and they connected to them. And because the Corderos, the father lost his job and they lost their house. They were having to live in an RV, a whole pile of them. He also had the father, Francisco, he had some behavior that was put strain on his family. He had an addiction to pornography since he was a teenager. And the Massachusetts Department of Children and Families, where they lived, had investigated him for looking at CP and showing those images to their children. He denies the allegation, and the state took no further action, the article says. So the Pences visited, and the Corderos said, yippee skippy peanut butter. They signed the caregiver authorization affidavit. It's a notarized contract that granted the Pences the right to make medical and educational decisions for the children. And then they departed, went back to north of Seattle. And it became a problem almost immediately. Almost immediately. The Pences had a real hard time with the Cordero children, who were raised very differently than they were raising and homeschooling their children. And almost from the beginning, the Cordero children were not a good fit. And Massachusetts DCF reached out to the sheriff's department where they were living for a wellness check, well, a welfare check, and found that the family was all healthy and appeared happy. The mother was paying all the expenses out of pocket for the kids, and they seemed to be well cared for, so they left the children there. But at that point, Michelle was getting very stressed out by a lot of things that were happening and how the Cordero children weren't getting with the program. And when Massachusetts CPS started trying to reach out again with the idea of taking the children into foster care in Massachusetts and splitting the family group up, that's when they decided they would move. They moved at that point. They did just like the Rodriguezes. They moved away from an agency that was investigating them. And so they moved to Texas. Since he worked for Microsoft, he could work from anywhere in the US, and they moved to another bigger house. And it was during the period that they first had the Cordero children that the Cordero parents were under investigation by DCF Massachusetts. The agency hasn't told anybody why they were looking at the people, but they tried to do two more welfare checks, the children at DCF's request. And when they told the families, both families, they were going to take custody of the kids, the Cordero children, bring them back to Massachusetts, and they would likely be split up. That's when the move took place. And the Pences started pressuring the Corderos to sign the children over to them for adoption. So that's what they did. So it was, like I said, just like a million disrupted adoptions, they just signed on the dotted line so they could avoid Massachusetts DCF. And when they moved to Texas, the Corderos moved to Texas too, so that they could still be part of the children's lives. And at that time, the Corderos were actually still actively having children. So they had three children at home at that point, I do believe I read, and then the five that the Pence family had. They spent a year in Texas before running off to Utah. And I don't know if that move had to do with CPS, but it might have because they were very unhappy with the fact that the Corderos were so active in their children's lives, even though they had actually legally adopted the kids. So that was a point where Christopher Pence decided he wanted the Corderos dead and started taking pains to make that happen. You should see this. If you get a chance, I'm going to post the link. I want you to look at the Mexican Mafia page where he paid the money to have the hit. It is the most sketchy looking thing. It looks like something circa 1999 that somebody put together with Front Page. So where does all of this Hitman Sinaloa cartel lead, this website? Well, the website actually leads to somewhere in Romania. It leads to a bunch of internet scammers that for them to get a payday. And that's what they've been doing since 2016. They're running a stable of these hitman websites on the dark web. Sicilian hitmen, Yakuza, Mafia, and they were offering bogus murder for hire services. And when someone paid, they just took the money, and that was it. And they never acted on any of it. And Ukrainian, Ukraine and Russia, I got that on the brain. The Romanian authorities arrested them, these guys, but nobody went to jail. It was right back to business as usual, taking money from various people. And one of them started working supposedly as an FBI informant at that point. So that's kind of how we ended up with this guy getting busted, of all things. And even though the hitmen are all made up, these guys that are trying to buy hitman services, hit me man, are doing a serious disservice because at one point in 2016, Stephen Allwine, who was a Minnesota IT specialist, he was a deacon at his church. He paid like something like $5,000 or $6,000 to this group to have his wife killed, and when it didn't happen, he murdered her himself. Now he's currently serving a life sentence in Minnesota. But that is the damage these guys do. Not just do they take money, but some of these people become so desperate to have the hit happen, they carry it out themselves. And the website started working with a murder for hire program in BBC, and feeding them all of these information on who was paying what to have who whacked. It was a whole bunch of people. And these tips kept landing on the desk of FBI agents, and most of the time nothing was done. But Brian DeCar had one land on his desk in Albany, and he drove out to tell Christina Cordero that somebody was trying to kill her. And she wouldn't believe it at first that Pence was the suspect, the one that was trying to kill her, but he was. And they had already made plans to visit Utah at the end of the month. She kept saying, "No, there's no way. Please make sure my children and their adopted family are safe because whoever wants me dead might go after them too." She never dreamed it was the adoptive family, the husband of the adoptive family had paid for her to be murdered in what was supposed to look like an accident. So on October 27th, 2021, the FBI came a calling and they knocked in the door and arrested Christopher. And he eventually did plead guilty. He pled guilty. Um, and the children were removed, the Cordero children. He pled guilty, went to jail. And the judge was saying what a good, righteous, upstanding patriarch he was, a good Christian man. He only got 7 years, 7 years for hiring a hitman, which means sadly he's going to be out. He's going to come out. And who knows what will happen at that point. Who knows? Because one of the things that could happen is pointed out in this article as the Department of that takes care of children in Utah. I forgot which one. I don't know if they have a DCF or they have a CPS. Could legitimately order his wife to not allow him to live in the home. There could possibly be the only way for her to keep custody of her children is to not allow the father back in the family. And his youngest child would still be plenty young enough for him to parent. That's one of the reasons that they're looking at this too. All it would take would be one call to welfare upon his release, according to this, to trigger an investigation into the safety of the children under his care. So we'll see. We'll see where that goes with this. I'm very curious, but the article does not mention at all that this is a Quiverfull family. This is how Quiverfull families act. They do child collection. They try to have as many children as possible. They live cut off from this world. They get a whole lot of food stamp and welfare money if they're not making a ton of money. This father was clearly making a bunch if he was working for Microsoft and was able to afford increasingly large homes. I'm going to say he probably was not ever going to be kept in jail that long. And I'm sure he wasn't collecting, state money at all for these kids. So Michelle, the wife, has doubled down on all this and is not talking to the press. She wouldn't talk to the author of this article. She wouldn't do anything. Now, I cannot find her blog, but that I don't know why that would be. I might be able to find it later. If I do, I'll go ahead and link to that here too as well. So, thank you for hanging in here with me. These are just my opinions. I wanted to talk about this case because it suddenly popped up on my newsfeed. And the more I read it, the more I was like, this is another Quiverfull case. This is a case of a Quiverfull family going haywire, which, like I said, my old church, eventually everybody goes haywire. Something happens. Not as dramatic as this, even though I do have to say we had somebody in our fellowship for a long time who ended up losing it like this guy did. And he didn't hire a hitman. He went out and killed the owner of Prince Michelle Vineyards in Culpeper, Virginia. And he is currently in jail serving a life sentence for doing that. And it was doubly tragic because the owner of Prince Michelle Vineyards was a Jewish survivor of the Holocaust. So he's having bad luck all around. This is typical Quiverfull behavior, even if the media can't pick it up. Every now and then I run across an article like this. Like example, the Turpins. When that happened and I started hearing about isolated homeschooled children in 15 passenger vans, I was like, that is Quiverfull. So there you go. Know when you read news stories that some of these things, the reporters are doing the best jobs they can, but if they're not familiar with the subculture, they're going to make some mistakes in reporting on it and understanding what it is that the family actually believes and acts on a daily basis. Will this man come out and stay keep his children? But I went ahead and put an alert on all of these people because I want to see what happens next. I want to see exactly what happens. A Google alert, I should say, because I find these things fascinating. When it goes haywire and it's something big like this, or the father killing the owner of Prince Michelle Vineyards, I'm always curious as hell. Because as I've explained before, women fall into this and drag their husbands in because they want to change their husband. The marriage is unhappy, and they figure if they just are submissive enough that God will honor their sacrifice and fully change them. It doesn't work that way. I have never seen a man won without a word by any of this. I've never seen a man transformed by any of this crap. I've seen men change when they leave for the better. Cough, my husband. But I've never seen it actually happen on the hoof like they like to scream about. So there you go. Like I said, just my opinion. Don't believe me, I talk about. Don't bully these people. Don't bully our dear Catherine with her own stupidity because it's just too. You guys have a great day. I'm going to try to be back on Friday. I'm trying to spend less time online and it's not always working out well. And I just want it. I just want us to return to some sanity and safety in this world. Love you guys.